Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your two hosts, Nor Kyle.
And I'm the other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
So, thank you for joining us. Here we are, another week here on the internets with many of our usuals, a few guests we don't get to see very often. Happy to have all of you. And we're also happy to have you if you're watching on the replay. You are with us in spirit, and we are with you in spirit. So, thanks for your time. Thanks for your energy for the next little bit that we're going to spend together talking about this cool story that we are going to unpack from the Fourth Way tradition, or at least written within the context of the Fourth Way tradition. And before we get started, I guess we do need to do our spiel as well as an announcement or two.
All right, here's the spiel. Thanks for watching. If you like this, hit the like button. If you don't like this, hit the like button anyway. It helps us out. And we'd love it if you subscribe to our channel. And so what are our announcements?
So our announcements are that we are planning to do the virtual retreat in November. I'm going to be announcing that officially probably by the end of the week, by this time next Sunday. And
The virtual retreat is different than the Sweden retreat.
Exactly. Yes, this is something that anyone can participate in. It's going to be online. It's usually something we do for 30 days, and we generally have a theme for the retreat. And it is by donation, so you donate what you can.
If you can.
If you can, yes. And that is to, to support this community that we are building together, to enrich it. It allows us to have quality time together beyond just Sunday talks, which are important, but during the retreat we get to have more
We get to go deeper.
and focused time with each other. Yeah, it's more intimate, I would say. And we meet new people. Sometimes new people show up during our group gatherings during the retreat. So I look forward to sharing more details with all of you on that very soon. And any other things?
That's it.
That's it. Yeah, Mushtaq is not going to be here next week. I will be, taking
So
charge
everybody
of the ship.
come out and support Noor
Yeah.
with doing this. Not that she actually needs the support, because she kind of makes everything happen anyway, but support her anyway.
I would certainly appreciate that. So if you can make it, that would be amazing. And I look forward to seeing you then. So with all of that said, let's get started on tonight's topic. We're going to be discussing it's more of like a booklet, like a libretto kind of thing. It is called The Struggle of the The Struggle of the
Magicians.
Help.
Magicians.
Magicians. Scenario of the ballet. So he considered it kind of a ballet. So we'll be talking about that this evening and exploring the nuances of it, which are not necessarily readily apparent.
Yeah, it's interesting. He wrote this at the beginning of his career as a teacher.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes. And he wrote it probably originally in Russian. And it was originally meant to be performed for a Russian audience.
Yeah.
It was, excerpts from it were, I think, first performed in 1914. So right after, when did World War II end? God,
17?
Yeah, so right in that messy area.
14, 19, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a time when spiritualism was really hot, right? And lots of, mysteries of the East were, that kind of Orientalism was very much in vogue at this time, wasn't it?
Very much so. All over the Western world. Russia was steeped in it. The Brits were really getting involved in the Germans with anthroposophy and that sort of thing. Were getting very heavily into all of this stuff. So the time was ripe. And so this play slash ballet was at one level a recruitment instrument. It was designed to capture people's attention and get them interested in Gurdjieff's school that he was trying to build. At another level, it contains interesting material that is deeper than the superficial layer of the story. And the story is super superficial in certain ways.
I mean, there's also something to be said about it being what we consider very trope-driven.
Yes, it is entirely trope-driven.
Yeah, I mean, were these tropes then?
Yes.
Probably they're much more.
Most of these tropes are right out.
Yeah.
Most of these tropes are right out of Madame Blavatsky.
Okay, so I mean, again, that harkens back to the fact that all of that stuff was kind of like very hot at the time. But I mean, these are things that we often see in media today, as we'll be exploring as we go along.
And so he started performing at least excerpts from this ballet somewhere around 1914, 1915, to build his first groups of students in St. Petersburg. And he used it to lay the foundation of his work, because hidden in this little document is the framework of the Fourth Way. And the thing is, it was parts of it were performed in Europe, parts in the U.S., and by the time we get to World War II, it disappeared. And people didn't even know it existed for a long time, except in Gurdjieff's small groups. So we're going to take a look at this and go through the 5 acts. It's very short. You could read this in less than an hour. You could read it out loud in about an hour, about 60 minutes. And yeah, 1914 to 1918. So start of World War II is when it was first performed. So, let's talk about the play. First, the play is done in 5 acts, and we're going to go through all 5 acts, inshallah, and take a look at what they mean, and take a look at the salient points. The first act takes place in the city, as you see behind me, in a marketplace. And the city is unique in that it is extremely multicultural. He describes, Gurdjieff describes the city as having people from all over Asia hanging out there. So you have Christians, Muslims, Jews, Zoroastrians, Buddhists, Hindus, and God knows who else. All spending time there. And we are introduced first to the city with its heavily multicultural elements. Think either Bukhara or Samarkand, because this is something at a crossroads where many, many people travel through. Persians come up, and Chinese come over, and Turks come over, and everybody's there, and they're all doing business. And we are introduced in Act 1 to the city, and then we are introduced to the important characters. Gafar enters with his buddy Rosalia. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
Rosula. Anyway, Gafar is this young, probably 32, 33 years old, and he is described as being a Parsi. A Parsi is a Zoroastrian from India. And Rasula is his man Friday, his minion. Gafar is rich, entitled. He is obviously narcissistic. You'll
Yeah,
see that as it goes along.
he's an attractive young, rich dude who
Yeah,
knows that he's attractive and is very aware of his status.
yes. Yeah, help me out with this because you will see him in a slightly different way than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could say he's definitely a narcissist, he's most comfortable associating with his peers, and even then he treats them with a bit of, patronization and contempt, but everyone below him, he's like, ugh, he'd rather not be near them, he'd rather not talk to them. At best, he's avoiding them, but mostly he's just very. He has no time for people who are beneath him. Let's put it that way. And he's spoiled. Like he's had everything he's ever wanted in life.
Yep. Now he's in the marketplace, right behind me over there, and he and his sidekick are checking things out when out from one of the alleys comes the lady Zainab and her sidekick. Zainab is described as a young Persian woman, very much like our own Zainab.
Yes. So.
And she is kind and intelligent and beautiful and all of these things that make her wildly attractive. And Gafar takes one look at her and is smitten by her. He doesn't even understand why. And she and her companion Halia are moving through the marketplace, and she's giving alms to beggars. And she spies this one beggar woman with a son by her side, probably about 10 years old, and he's injured. He's got some sort of injury on his arm. From the description, I would say it's probably an ulcer of some sort or maybe an abscess. But she goes over and she gives them some alms, and she wants to dress the boy's wound, and she has nothing to dress it with but a scarf that she has. So she wraps it around his arm, and she gives the woman some instructions about where to go to get some help for her son. And while she's doing this, Gafar is watching her like a hawk. And finally, he sends his man Rasulia to find out, to find out what he can about this woman.
Yeah,
Who is she?
he's really curious about her because he doesn't typically, given the worlds he moves through, he doesn't usually find himself in the same orbit as a woman like that. So he's very curious about her. He doesn't usually take notice of women like that, we should say.
Yes. So, Zainab and her companion move on, and Gafar notices that Zainab's scarf is around the arm of the beggar boy. He decides he wants it. He goes over, offers to buy it. The mother refuses, and so he basically just throws a big pile of money down, grabs the scarf off the boy's arm, and walks off with it. The woman is not entirely displeased by this because it's a pretty nice sum of money on the ground. And so she takes the boy and heads down the alley after Zainab, following her instructions. Now, while all of this is happening, or as this ends up, this dervish comes walking down one of the streets. And as he's coming, he is doing some sort of sacred dance, and he's chanting. Now, this dervish is known to be very important, very spiritual, and has the respect of the entire city. And the chant that he is chanting is translated is, God is one for all, but he is threefold. Men err because he is sevenfold. In his totality, he is one sounding. In his division, he is many sounding. And in another division, he is contradictory. He is everywhere in all forms. When men see him, it depends on their qualities which part they touch. But who touches if he is ignorant? Sees in part, he sees in the part that he touches all of him, and not doubting, preaches about him. He sins already because he acts against the laws laid down in the commandments of the Most High. The commandment is this: I am truth. Your unbelief draws you into nearness with me because he who sees me. And then the last line is obscured. We don't know what it says because of the noise of the marketplace. Now, this is interesting because this is almost a non sequitur. The dervish appears only in this one spot, says this, and we never hear from him again. So what do you all make of what he said? God is one, but he is threefold, and men err because he is sevenfold.
Yeah, what does that remind you of? Feel free to unmute.
It reminds me of Taoism.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
something to that.
There is something that, yeah.
Thanks, Nancy. How about you?
Anything
Eugene?
more obvious?
That
Come
wasn't
on,
a-
Jonathan.
Well, Eugene is unmuted.
Oh, Eugene, lay it on us.
Well, yeah. Well, it says that he's contradictory. Certainly, when we start trying to figure out rationally God, we get into much of contradictions. So, that to me is one of the fundamental lines there. That don't expect God to be rationally attractive. So,
Yes. Nancy, you were going to say something before I so rudely interrupted you?
You gotta unmute. There you
I'm
go.
going to have to look at it again, but there was something in there about people not really knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
And that actually, now that I think about it, it might apply to all people, including the white magician.
Could be.
But I'll look at it again, and
Yeah,
if we're still on the topic.
There's the link to the PDF in the chat, which will also
Yeah, we
be
should have. Yes.
in the description. So, that'll be there.
So, the most obvious thing here is that the dervish is talking about the law of three and the law of seven, which make up the Enneagram, which is important in all of this. This, in some ways, is Gurdjieff's introduction of the Enneagram to the public. You also have, what is that line? The commandment is this: I am truth.
Famous
Now,
line.
Yeah. If you know that line, in Arabic, that's Ana al-Haq. And that's what Mansur al-Hallaj uttered in a state of divine intoxication and got murdered for.
Yeah, because it's pretty much saying I am.
I am
with
God.
Divine
Yeah.
truth. Yeah, I
Yes.
am God.
And here, God is saying, I am God, but I am truth. Haq is one of the names of God, the true and the real. So you have all of this going on in this one little thing that's almost randomly inserted at the end of the first act.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got the other bit, which is
Yeah?
that it says something about your untruth draws you into nearness with me. And that is kind of Gafar's story.
Yes,
Your unbelief draws you into nearness with me.
because he who sees me, ...
Mysteries.
Mysteries, great mysteries.
Well, we don't know how Gafar's story comes out, and we don't get the dervish's whole song.
No, we don't.
Yeah. Would you say there's also a reference to the three forces in this?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
God
In-
is one for all, but he is
Yeah.
threefold.
So, I mean, this part is what stood out to me. In his totality, he is one sounding. So that's affirming like everything is included. In his division, he is many sounding. Not this, not that. Division denying. And then in another division, he is contradictory, which is
The
that opens the
reconciling force,
possibility
yes.
for reconciliation. Yeah.
Yep, so this has actually got a lot hidden in it for us to coax out over time. But we must get on to Act 2.
Indeed.
Act 2 is at the school of the white magician. The first we see an introduction to his students. They're all doing important studently things, very scientific. You know, there's an emphasis on science at the magician's house.
Yeah, it does seem that way, yeah. As opposed to superstition and wishful thinking and all that
Yes.
stuff. And there's also kind of a special ambiance there. You know, people are tending towards, as they say, kindness, graciousness, friendliness, openness. There's a
Yep.
sense of collaboration there.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of we're all friends and we're all in this together.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we are working in cooperation with each other as opposed to in competition with each other. Once we get a look at the students of the school in their general daily milieu, we meet the assistant to the white magician, who is an old guy. And he is also very smart and very kindly, and everybody likes him.
Yeah. So, I mean, there isn't this sense of rigid hierarchy with people at the bottom, you know, the minions,
Yeah,
the losers of the group. Like, everyone is kind of as a team, as you say.
yeah, everyone is on the same level.
Yeah.
And even the teachers, which are the assistant and the magician, are not putting themselves above anybody else.
Right. And
Now-
everybody kind of has this sense of well-being to them, no matter
Yeah.
whether they're youthful or of an advanced age.
Yep. Yeah, there's a healthiness about this. At least that's the feel I get from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of
seems to
course,
be what
it
is
hits
implied.
all of the tropes in this in a very serious way. You know, it's all of the tropes of the white magician and the black magician, and
As we'll see, yeah.
yeah,
And
as we'll see.
like goodness being young and beautiful and light and white and airy and all of that stuff. Cleanliness, order.
Yep. Now there's an equal number of men and women in this group, or as Gurdjieff writes it, men and girls. Every time we heard that, Nora grimaced and gritted her teeth.
Yeah, but I mean, we take that as a sign of the times and move on. So
Yes. And they're all dressed alike in white tunics. The only difference is in the colors of the belt and circlets that they have around their hair. The men have silver and the women have gold, as I remember.
yeah,
Fillets, fillets, however one says it. So this hits every single Blavatskian trope of the Great White Brotherhood.
oh god,
Yeah.
yep,
And it was meant to, because that's how the audience understood things at the time.
Yeah.
And then the white magician enters. He's tall, well-built old man with a benign and pleasant face and long white beard. He's dressed in a long white robe. Again, all of the tropes. And Gurdjieff goes into great detail in all of this, what everybody's wearing, what colors everything is, even down to what kind of shoes they're wearing. Like everybody here is wearing sandals.
Yeah.
Now he has a long staff with an ivory knob on the top, and hanging from a thick gold chain around his neck is the symbol of the Enneagram, worked in precious stones. Not sure what that looks like. And the Enneagram doesn't really, unless it's just got precious stones all over it.
Yeah, that's what I picture at the points.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Now the magician comes in and he blesses all of his students, and he has a throne and he sits in it, and there's a symbol above the throne that lights up when he sits. Again, this follows the tropes of the time. This is like, ooh, ah, look at all of this symbol. Gurdjieff is hitting his audience's spirituality buttons, one after another after another.
So he knows his audience, essentially.
He knows his audience very, very well, and he knows how to play this. He has written this to play to the audience.
So, I mean, who do you think was that target audience at this time?
That target was upper-class Russians with a spiritual bent.
Yeah, specifically for the, like, Orientalist esotericism.
Yeah, of which there was a lot, because Russia had really pushed its way into Central Asia at the time. They had been grabbing up land around the Caucasus and towards Turkestan and places like that. So they were getting all of the cool stuff coming back to them. Remember, Gurdjieff was born in a town that was under Russian occupation. He grew up as a citizen of Russia.
And now he's in the big city, I assume. At this time. Like,
Yeah, he's in St. Petersburg, which is the spiritual heart of Russia.
There you
Much
go.
more so than Moscow, I think, especially back then. And all of the students greet the white magician by kissing his hand, which is very common in the Middle East. And as this is all going on, Zainab enters, and she goes up to the magician and kisses his hand, and then it's evident that Zainab is one of the magician's favorites, one of his favorite students. And she goes and talks with the other students, and she tells them about the beggar woman and the boy. And one of the pupils comes up to the magician and his assistant and asks for an explanation of something, and the magician's answer is very cool, so they all come up and they gather around and they listen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Groovy. I wish I could hear what he's saying. But he gets up off of his throne. The special magical symbol goes out when he gets up. Back then, people weren't familiar with simple pressure switches, I think. And he goes over and he works with a microscope, and he gathers everybody around and he has them look in the microscope. And then he goes over and works on a telescope and then has everybody look through that. And then he...
We also have to talk about the little boy.
Yes, but the little boy happens after this.
Got it.
Yeah. He says, the chief idea of the exposition is as follows. What is above is similar to what is below. Where have we heard this before? And what is below is similar to what is above. Every unity is a cosmos. The laws which govern the megalocosmos also govern the macrocosmos, the deuteterocosmos, the mesocosmos, the tritocosmos, and others, including down to the microcosmos. Having studied one cosmos, you will know all others. The nearest cosmos of all for our study is the tritocosmos, and for each one of us, the nearest subject of study is oneself. Knowing oneself completely, one will know all, even God, since men are created in his likeness. So, those first lines, what is above is similar to what is below, and what is below is similar to what is above. Where did Gurdjieff crib that from? Who knows the answer to this question?
Hermetic teaching.
Yes, specifically from the Emerald Tablets of Thrice Great Hermes. That's the opening lines of it. That which is above is like unto that which is below, and that which is below is like that to that which is above. So this is pure Hermeticism that he's giving. But then he goes into all of these cosmoses, which are an interesting way for him to demonstrate his ray of creation, because that's what he's talking about there. And he's putting this idea out that all of these are connected. If you understand one, you understand the other, any other. He says that the tritocosmos is the one that is best for us to study. And that's he's looking at the cosmos that is connected to the law of three. And that we are the best place to study that. We ourselves, in our own selves.
Let's remind people about the law of three real quick.
The law of three sits very high up on Gurdjieff's ray of creation. It happens right after 1. You have 1, 3, 6, 12, 24, 48, 96. That's the law of, that's the numbers of the ray of creation.
And these have to do with constraints upon reality. And the lower you go, the more there are. So if you consider it that way, a law of three, that's a lot fewer than perhaps where Gurdjieff thought we lived at the level of
48.
48, yes. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was wrong about that. Yeah. Or things have changed since then. I'm pretty sure that we are living at the ray at the level of 96 on the ray of creation. Sure seems like it to me. But what do I know?
So
anyway,
he's also saying, yeah, so we've discussed that connection to the law of three, this hearkening to that idea within Gurdjieff's cosmology and his framework for talking about these things. And he touches on this know thyself concept as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we've discussed that in previous talks, but we can think of that saying of the Prophet Muhammad, which goes, "He who knows himself knows his Lord," which Ibn Arabi wrote a lot about in his discussion of the oneness of being. Before it became to be called that down the road, that's exactly what he was getting at.
Yep.
So he's packing a lot into this one little, he's making the character of this white magician the proponent of a lot of his ideas within the context of this tale.
Yep. And he is unequivocally saying, this is science, it's not superstition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Reminds me of a bit of doggerel poetry written by old Uncle Aleister Crowley, which was, we put no faith in virgin nor pigeon. Our method is science, our aim is religion. I don't know why I remember that just now, but it sort of fits.
So the pigeon, is that like the dove?
Yeah, that's like, the Holy Spirit coming down.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
All right. So that's
So,
it.
after this, right at this point, the beggar woman and her son come in. They're invited in, and Zainab begs the white magician to heal the boy. He looks at the boy's arm, calls for some stuff. They bring out a bowl and some liquid and a piece of silk cloth and the magic wand. And the magician soaks the piece of cloth in the liquid that he pours in the bowl. Then he lays it out on the boy's hand. He takes his magic wand and he makes passes over the arm. And then he whips the cloth away and the arm is healed and everybody goes, gasp! And it sounds like,
Ceremony.
yeah, it sounds like a very cool bit of sleight of hand, or in this case, sleight of mind. But it's saying that, the magician's got some chops. He's got some skills.
And one thing that also came to me is that in this scene, they're willing to help people in their community.
Yes.
Like Zainab she is a member of her community. She's willing to talk to people. She embodies all of those qualities I mentioned before, like kindness, graciousness, openness, being open-hearted towards people.
Yeah.
And this community, this school is willing to engage with everyday people.
Yeah, and they aren't like putting their noses up at this woman because she's a beggar. They aren't asking her for money. She needs help. Her son needs help. He'd probably lose his arm if it isn't healed. And so they heal his arm.
Yeah, the people who come to them asking for help will be given whatever help can be offered.
Yep. And, the magician tousles the boy's head and sends them on their way. And then they go into doing sacred gymnastics. They're doing physical exercise. They're doing something that probably looked very much like Gurdjieff's dances. And the last thing that Act 2 makes the point of is saying, these sacred dances are considered to be one of the principal subjects of study in all esoteric schools of the East, both in ancient times and at the present day. The movements of which these dances consist have a double purpose. They express and contain a certain knowledge, and at the same time they serve as a method of attaining a harmonious state of being. Combinations of these movements express different sensations, produce varying degrees of concentration of thought, create necessary efforts in different functions, and show the possible limits of individual force. Now, the thing is, what it says here that are considered to be one of the principal subjects of study in all esoteric schools in the East, that's not true. That's not even close to true.
Yeah.
But the audience doesn't know that.
Yeah, he's building his mythos. Yeah.
Yeah, he is building his own mythology here. And it obviously worked to some extent. And this is not to say that Gurdjieff was wrong about his movements. He wasn't. He was completely right about them being very, very important. But he had to present it in such a way that the Russian intelligentsia would buy into it. And the way to do that is to say, oh, this has always been the way. Every real spiritual school knows this. And if you're the first person to say something about it, they'll assume that what you said was right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you're the originator, that you have the knowledge. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sneaky, that Mr.
Very
Gurdjieff.
sneaky.
Yeah, can I throw in a thing?
Yes,
Sure.
of course.
Yeah, because the school of the, you're saying the school of the white magician is not hierarchical. It's
Well-
very hierarchical. It's just gracious about it.
I think there's something to be said, and we've talked about this. The guidance of the teacher is a critical component of a path that is, I mean, it's not 100% necessary, but it certainly makes things easier to have a guide, to have someone who can show you the way.
And there is a difference between respect and hierarchy.
Yes, and that becomes a little bit clearer when we see what goes on at the Black Magician's school. There isn't this domination through fear present at this school. I think that's the most important
Okay.
piece. Yeah. So when we say hierarchy, I think we mean domination, we
Yeah.
mean control. We
Yeah, the
mean
teacher is the
setting
teacher.
mandates that are against
Yeah.
your personal, like instead of your natural drive and your natural goal setting happening, someone sets it for you. Yeah.
Yeah,
And puts you in
and
your place.
the teacher at this school is the teacher, and he's given respect for that.
Yeah. And respect is important, it
And
shows that
but
you value the
respect
work you're
is
doing.
is different than hierarchy, and I think Gurdjieff works to show this. Even though he is coming from a place where hierarchy was everything. I mean, we're talking Imperial Russia, for God's sakes.
This was a time where it was very normal to kiss the ring. I think we do not relate to that so much now at all. But again, there are some cultures where that is very much a thing even today. So we can acknowledge that. And yes, Aaron says the spiritual stamp of approval. Yeah, when you have all these little tropes and signals of, ooh, great powers, that certainly helps give the stamp of authenticity to this kind of thing. And we'll touch on your comment about Pythagoras probably towards the end when we get to returning to discussion about the Enneagram. But yeah, I think it's important to touch on the fact that this act ends with everyone in the school appreciating that there is a force in the world that is greater than any of them. They spend the last bit of this section kneeling in prayer when they see that the first rays of morning are coming up over the horizon. So even with all of this power the magician has, he knows that it doesn't originate with him. And that it's not really about him. They're in service to something greater.
So, we get to Act 3, the House of Gafar. So, this is sometime after the events in the marketplace. And Gafar is waiting for Rasulullah to return. He has sent Rasulullah out to entice Zainab to join Gafar's harem, which is done through offering her all manner of gifts and bribes, beautiful jewelry, wonderful cloth. He's basically trying to buy her. Now, Gafar has had a harem since he was a kid, since he was like in his late teens.
Yeah,
and he has
so
a harem now.
he has this sense that any woman can be bought. He just needs to figure out what their their kink is, let's say.
Yeah.
Maybe it's power, maybe it's being with a hot dude, maybe it's his money, maybe it's his status that they want to benefit from.
Yeah, and every time Rasulullah returns with a refusal, it causes Gafar to become more obsessed with literally with possessing Zainab, as the text says. He wants her as an object in his collection, and he has a collection. After all of this being turned down, he decides that the only thing that will win Zainab is to offer to marry her. So he calls his aunt and asks his aunt to propose marriage between Zainab and Gafar. And his aunt gets a couple of her sidekicks, and they go off to do this. Well, his aunt is gone. Jafar is all anxious and everything, and Rasulullah gets him to relax by watching his dancing girls. And there is this whole scene where he has 12 different dancing girls from 12 different cultures, each of which comes out dressed in their traditional garb and does the dance of their people. And, you know, he's basically viewing these women as property. They are his slaves as far as he's concerned. And he wants Zainab to be part of this.
Yeah, just like, you know, any object of desire that he might want to acquire, he feels like one way or another, it's got to happen. And I think he's so used to that he's at a point where he's almost numb to this. So he has a sense that all women can be bought, as I said. They're all easily objectified. None of them are trustworthy. They all want something, and once he gives it to them, they're going to be very fickle in their loyalty to him, and eventually they bore him. He loses any interest in them.
Yeah,
He
and
just
what he
wants to have-
wants,
Yeah,
what he wants is a woman who will actually see him and treat him with respect and actually love him. He misses the whole point where he is not willing to give that back to her.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really apparent to us. I wonder how apparent that was to the people of the time.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because that was at a time when, especially in the upper classes, arranged marriages were still a big thing.
Right. And he's a true narcissist in the sense that he feels like he deserves a quote unquote good woman.
Yeah, he's
Without
basically
having
like
to-
an incel. Yeah.
Without having to be a good man himself. And what we mean by good here, of course, is to be trustworthy, devoted, kind, attractive is probably one of the things that he'd be looking for. Humble, honest, honorable. He wants to possess those things because those enhance his sense of himself.
Yeah, but he is not capable of giving that back. He is not capable of seeing any woman as subject, only as object.
Right. So he would get to live through Zainab's goodness and claim it as his own without having to really embody those in his own way.
And while he's watching the dancing girls, his auntie returns with the bad news that Zainab has told them to screw off. She completely rejects the proposal, and Gafar is like taken aback because he was of the opinion that no woman could turn down the offer of being married to him. And that Zainab would reject this infuriates him. The text says that it's almost as if he's gone from love to hate, though he was never in love, he was just in desire. But there's this anger that he should be rejected like this. And Gafar is infuriated by this. So after a little while, Rasulullah, thinking this over and over, comes to a conclusion and offers a suggestion to Gafar. And they argue over it a little bit. Gafar doesn't want to do this, but finally he agrees. And they send for an old sorceress. And Gafar asks her if she can cast a spell on a woman to make her love him. And she says, of course I can do that. And she says, who do you want? And he says, I want the lady Zainab. And the old sorceress goes, oops, nope, can't do that. Sorry, can't help you. Nope, take your money, I don't want it. Because she knows that Zainab is the student of the white magician, which means she's got some chops of her own, and she's under the protection of the school. So the sorceress refuses, but suggests that there is one who can do what he wants if he's willing to pay enough.
You know, it's interesting. that up until the point where they finally get this woman to show up and proceed, he seems to have a little bit of a struggle of conscience with this.
Yeah, he does. A
Yeah.
slight struggle of conscience, but his ego
Yeah,
gets the best of him.
exactly. Like his ego wins out, but there is this nascent sense within him that something about this is wrong.
Yep.
And yet he can't help himself at this point. And it's interesting that Aaron says, I get the sense that the audience expects that he'll, quote, learn a lesson, unquote, and still get what he wants in the end, in the sense that they're rooting for him. And at that time, I mean, even now, I guess that could be the case where you're like, okay, what's the redemption story here? Because the guy always gets the girl in the end.
Yep.
Yeah, and perhaps he's afraid to invoke sorcery. Yes, I mean, getting
Yes.
involved in that is always a dangerous. It's a. What are you risking in moving forward? Absolutely. So how does it play out with this woman?
Well, that's where we get to Act 4.
Yeah.
Act 4 is the school of the black magician.
So they've got these sacks full of treasures that they're taking to this dude.
Yep. And we start by the magician school is in a cavern, which again hits all the tropes. This is like everything about Act 4 is the trope of the evil magician. So we meet the magician students in the cavern, and they're not very nice. We see lots of things about them that make us find them repellent. For one thing, they're doing their practices, and their practices include palm reading and
Making potions.
and there's like boa constrictors
tarot
gliding
cards.
around.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
black cats in the room. There's like,
Yep.
all these trophies of dead animals and people just hanging out, skulls and wall mounts of heads, etc.,
Yeah,
etc.
it's bad.
So
And the
I
pupils
mean,
are both men and women
yeah,
of varying ages, some young, some older, but all of unpleasing appearance. One or two are deformed,
ooh,
thin with disagreeable, shifty eyes, disheveled hair, and warts. They all have warts. Gurdjieff was big on warts for the bad guys. And it's interesting, he describes the movements of these students to be sharp, angular, and jerky. They have no fluidity to how they move.
yeah.
Their attitude towards each other is hostile and derisive. They are obviously in competition with each other. They are dressed in a slovenly fashion in short, violet-colored coats and black trousers. And all of the bad guys wear Turkish slippers. All of the good guys wear sandals.
Turkish slippers.
Yeah, I like Turkish slippers. They're fairly comfortable.
So this is a place of like disorder and carelessness in a sense, and rivalry, hostility, contempt, distrust, fear. Fear will play a role here.
Yeah, fear is
And
a big role.
there's this trope of unwellness representing badness too.
Yeah.
Like ugliness is a sign that this is a bad person. Unfortunately, we know that's not true, but it is a trope often used in stories like this, so we have to take that for what it is.
Yep. So, into this mix, the black magician enters. And again, he's a creepy guy.
He's a weirdo.
Yeah. His movements are also jerky, and he has some sort of weird characteristic manner. His glance is contemptuously piercing. On his feet are Turkish slippers. And he has a he has a golden pentacle on a black silk cord around his neck.
So there's a cue. Yeah.
Yeah, when the magician enters, all of the students fall on their faces. And he goes to the throne without even looking at anyone. On his way, he even steps on one or two of his students. He seats himself on the throne. There's a symbol that lights up over his head, too. That darn pressure switch.
I think it's another pentagram, right?
Yeah, something like that. So the ritual of greeting there is he opens his coat and everybody comes up and kisses his belly. And this harkens back to some of the old accusations of witchcraft sabbaths. So it's designed to it's designed to evoke this nasty feeling.
And it does. You know, that does feel a bit like, as I read it, I felt like that feels like my personal space does not feel comfortable invading another person's personal space to kiss their belly. That is a lot more intimacy than I would want to share in that kind of situation.
And from time to time, he will knock over one of his students with a kick as they kiss his belly. And the others mock whoever gets knocked over. Ha ha, look at you, you're laying on the ground. And as they're done with all of that greeting, he puts them in rows and gets them to do certain movement exercises too. So there is this implication that movement is the key to a lot of this stuff going on in both places. At this point, the old sorceress enters, and she comes and fearfully greets the black magician, gives him a big old kiss on the belly, and says something to him in a cringing manner, pointing towards the entrance. After a moment of reflection, the magician nods his head in consent, and the old woman goes out backwards and quickly returns with Gafar, Rasula, and the two servants carrying sacks of gifts. The servants come in trembling with fear and looking about them with astonishment and horror, and when they reach the center of the cavern, they throw down the sacks and rush headlong away. Rasula and even Gafar feel almost as much fear as the servants.
And this is not a man who is intimidated by much in his life.
Yeah, he's usually able to buy whatever or whoever he needs to. So Gafar explains to him about Zainab, and when the magician figures out who Zainab is, he absolutely refuses to do anything whatsoever, knowing like the sorceress that Zainab is the pupil of the white magician. Gafar persists. He starts pulling money out of his pouch, pulls off his rings and jewelry and throws them in the pile until finally the magician relents. On the condition that Gafar gets something that was in contact with Zainab. Gafar remembers that he has Zainab's scarf. So he gives it to the magician, who begins working magic, and it's a basic sympathetic magic where he's building a puppet using clay and the scarf, and he does it drawing energy from his students directly into himself so that he can drain them rather than him. And they go through this whole process, and the spell works, and he has enscrolled Zainab. So after a while, Gafar drags himself out with his buddy, and we leave there and go on to Act 5, the final act. Act 5 starts out with everybody at the white magician's school, with the exception of Zainab, and they are watching the pupils go through sacred movements and all this. When Halia, Zainab's sidekick, comes running in, and she throws herself on the ground before the magician and tells her all about this thing that has happened to Zainab. And, everybody goes, gasp. And the magician wants to know really what happened. So he asks for some volunteers. Several of his people express agreement, and he chooses one and places him in a chair. And he begins to put him into a hypnotic trance. After the guy's eyes close, he starts making mesmeric passes over him.
But notice he does this with consent.
Yes, he's
And
doing this
that's-
with a complete volunteer, and he's taking very good care of him. So after he has this guy in a deep hypnotic sleep, he starts questioning him. And the pupil answers. The room becomes half dark. This actually creates a vision for everybody there of what happened in Zainab's room. She's alone. She's in some sort of internal struggle. She jumps up and walks around nervously. She sits back down. There's something eating at her. And she suffers terribly. And
Yeah. So
Go
it
ahead.
says that she's experiencing fear, desire, curiosity, shame, which is interesting because to me this sounds like, or at least reminds me, that Zainab is a human being as much as anyone else. Like, she's
Yeah.
very driven by her focus to be a student of this school, and that's her big commitment in life. But somehow this magic ritual has sparked something inside of her that triggers less focus toward her real goals that she holds to be so dear to her. It triggers off some ego shit, essentially.
Yeah, it's hit the samskaras that she has
Yeah.
not yet had time to deal with.
And
It's a
she can't go
long
through this
process.
alone. Yeah, she can't
Yeah.
cope with this alone. She's clearly struggling with that. And she's doing her best, but it really seems that it is beyond her control ultimately.
And so, as she's going through this, Rasula enters. He bears trays of jewels. He's got all of this groovy stuff with him, and he starts giving her these gifts and asking her to please come with him, that Gafar awaits her.
Yeah, it's like she's been made more vulnerable to these enticements in a way. And so it's much easier to get her to leave her house and go off to see what Gafar is up to.
Yep, and Halia sees what's going on. She begs Zainab to get a grip, but Zainab is at this point deeply within the spell of the black magician. She has lost her will. Her will has been overwhelmed. So she throws a cloak around her and she goes out with Rasula. And that's when Halia runs to the white magician. After this, lights return to the studio where they're in. The magician moves away from the sleeper and he walks about the room trying to figure out what to do. They bring the guy back out of the trance, make sure he's doing well, give him something to drink. And the magician comes to a conclusion. he instructs his assistant, and he gives instructions to his assistant and the pupils, and they carry out the instructions. They create a ritual table, and this is, to me, this is interesting. They bring various things, certain vestments, various attuberances, the wand that he had used for healing, a cover on the table, and there's all of these tropes going on with the astronomical signs, both with the black magician and the white magician. This is chocked full of symbolism. The magician puts on his special robes.
And they've got special bowls and
Yeah, and that's where it gets
candles.
interesting. The pupils, under the direction of the magician's assistant, also get ready putting on similar cover. They cover their feet with a rubber like galoshes, something that's insulative. They wash their hands. Here's what I'm looking for. He takes a vessel like a large bowl and places it in front of him. Another vessel, of similar shape but smaller, he puts at the opposite end of the table. The two vessels are connected by a copper bar. The pupils hand him a liquid which he pours into the vessel. Around the first vessel stand 9 candles. 6 are alight and 3 are unlighted. Having taken the wand in his left hand, the magician makes certain movements with his right hand, pronounces some unknown words, argle, bargle. And at the same time, the pupils, 2 men on the right and 2 girls on the left, make passes above the smaller bowl. Now, for those of you who have studied your mesmer, this will sound familiar. Mesmer used bowls and tanks of water that were connected together in certain ways with copper rods to store animal magnetism.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that Gurdjieff is going right to this. This would
That has to
not
be
be
it.
something that us in the 21st century would really know about. But at that time, mesmerism was still a thing amongst the mystically inclined. And the idea of animal magnetism and mesmeric passes were a reality for these people. So they're looking at this going, I see what he's doing. He's creating an accumulator for animal magnetism. And his students are helping charge it. So that's going on. So they charge this up, and they keep charging it, and there's lights and bells and whistles and all this magical stuff. And the energy keeps building and building until there's this fearful explosion, and immediately there is in complete darkness. Then half light returns, and on the back wall a picture appears showing a portion of the cave of the black magician, who, seated on his throne, contorts himself, making convulsive movements. The white magician continues his manipulations. Again, there is a terrific explosion followed by the echo from behind the scenes, and accompanied by shrill whistling sounds and a great uproar. The black magician falls into convulsions from his throne. There is again a moment of complete darkness and oppressive silence, after which the light returns. So basically, he scrooches the black magician. He puts the fluence on him. He kicks his ass. Yeah, that's what it
Wizard
is.
battle, yes.
Yep. So first he takes care of that which created the spell. We don't know that the black magician died from this, but I speculate that he might have. Then, even though the white magician is extremely exhausted, he gets back to work. And again, you have the magician setting himself up in a chair with his students around him. and the magician's holding a wand, closes his eyes, whispers some words, and the light dims and another picture appears. It shows part of Gafar's room. He is half lying on the divan with his expression of joy and self-satisfaction, looking towards the inner room. Apparently he expects someone. Zainab enters with a woman who, bowing low before Gafar, motions her with her hand towards Zainab and immediately goes out backwards. Gafar rises, takes Zainab by the hand, and is about to seat her on the divan, when at once, with sudden start, they both become rooted to the spot in exactly those postures in which they were standing. After a short pause, they turn like automata and go out of the room. And they basically walk down the streets of the city like somnambulists, sleepwalking. And they show up at the white magician's school. They enter in this somnambulistic state. And at their appearance, the magician, big sigh of relief, he gets up and begins to take off his vestments and stuff, and he seats Zainab in one of the chairs, and he awakens her. Zainab, on coming to herself, asks those around her, what the heck is going on? And they explain what happened and points to the sleeping Gafar. She suddenly remembers, bursts into sobs, and with gestures of penance, I don't know what she has to be penitent about, throws herself at the feet of the magician. In other words, she came within a quarter-inch of being raped by Gafar. And she's shocked and shattered by this. It's got to be horribly traumatic realizing that you've had your will stolen from you.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And even in the midst of this, I mean, they are almost like taking Gafar in and giving him an opportunity to kind of own his shit, right? Because they sit him down just like they sit her down, and then they explain how he ended up there.
Yeah. But Gafar, people with small testicles and big engines.
So he gets a moment to, he gets his come to Jesus moment, I guess.
Yeah, and that's coming up next.
Yeah.
So, after taking off all of his excess vestments, he raises her from the ground and then goes to Gafar, who has already come to himself. Gafar is at first dumbfounded, but learning what has happened, he grows excited and almost threatens the magician, which would have been foolish. But the magician, with a calm smile, answers him. Gafar listens and gradually becomes more composed. The magician continues to talk, accompanying his words with gestures and pointing to the back of the room, where once more a picture appears. A street with a crowd of people is seen. There are women, children, old people. From a side street comes Gafar. He's old, bent and feeble. He is followed by some bright being. In spite of his age, Gafar is evidently very happy and cheerful. In the crowd, he is greeted by everyone. Women and men bow low to him, and children bring him flowers. All is joy, happiness, and blessing. The magician goes on speaking. The picture changes. The same street with a crowd of people. And again, Gafar appears, but this time he is accompanied by a terrible being of dark red hue. Gafar is an old man with an evil and dissatisfied face. Those who meet him turn aside with aversion and spit in his footsteps. Boys throw stones at him. Their disgust is plain, and it is obvious that everyone is revolted by the sight of him. The picture vanishes. The magician continues to speak. Gafar is evidently perturbed and overwhelmed by some inner struggle.
There's that inner struggle again.
Yep. The chief point of what the magician has said is this: as you sow, so shall you reap. The deeds of the present determine the future. All that is good and all that is bad, both are results of the past. It is the duty of every man in every moment of the present to prepare the future, improving on the past. Such is the law of fate. and the resource of all the laws be, and may the source of all the laws be breast. Now, some of you will remember that we have talked before about the difference between fate and destiny. And what Gafar got to see was both his fate and his destiny. His fate was to become this hated old weazened man that nobody wanted to have anything to do with. That would have been the natural outcome of the life he was leading. His destiny was to become a beloved figure. And it's up to him to choose which one he wants, to step along one line of action or another. And when the light returns, the assistant is standing next to the magician, and Zainab is standing next to him, and she's like kissing the magician's hand and is all grateful. And Gafar is at his feet in an attitude of reverence. And the magician utters a prayer. Lord Creator, and all his assistants, help us be able to remember ourselves at all times in order that we may avoid involuntary actions, as only through them can evil manifest itself. All sing, forces become transformed to be. The magician again blesses them with both hands. It says, may reconciliation, hope, diligence, and justice be ever with you all. They all sing amen, and the curtain drops. So, Gafar did not get the girl.
Nope.
Which I think is very, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, he has to earn that kind of relationship, and he is not there yet.
Nope.
We don't even really know what direction his life goes in. But
yeah, he could choose to go back to his old selfish ways.
He very well could. Yeah, this is his come to Jesus opportunity, let's say, rather than the moment, because he feels reverence now. He feels contrition now. Is that sustained? Is that something that he's willing to deepen into and be spurred on by? We don't know. But we can hope, right?
Yeah, we can hope. We can hope that things turn out well for him. For Zainab, on the other hand, things will turn out well because her feet are squarely on the path of her own self-awareness. She reminds me a lot of Hypatia of Alexandria. She has that feel of a woman who knows what she wants and has claimed her role as somebody who understands this stuff.
Mm.
And so that is the synopsis of the struggle of the magicians. On its surface layer, it's this kitschy, trope-filled bit of theater to punch everybody's spirituality buttons. And beneath that is some pretty cool stuff hidden. Some things that are essential to the work. Like the idea of meeting subject rather than object.
Yes.
Of cultivating loving kindness towards all creatures. All of these things are all hidden in here. So, what do you think? We've been going for an hour and a half. But it takes that long to get through this. So, thoughts, questions?
Yeah, Gene, what are you thinking?
Zainab, I was impressed with the fact that she kind of represents the fact that really what is within us is the dominating will be the factor that guides us in how we live our life. You know, she was influenced by the spell, but she ultimately wasn't changed by it because she had the inner qualities, the inner awareness of herself. So that's the only thing we have. We have to cultivate the inner awareness. and everything will be well. Let's say.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Eugene. Yeah, definitely. And I also I want to share before we move on that I appreciated that there's this sense of working together here. You know, there is that turning by Hyla and by Zainab herself and by the other students and the white magician. They all turn to each other for help and they're responsive to that seeking help. When Zainab finds herself in a rut, she's not abandoned in that. Folks come to her aid in order to help her head towards her destiny. And to stay on track, which is something that we've often shared is one of the really lovely things about being part of a collective, a circle, a group. As long as it's an effective group that has a sense of cohesiveness and a sense of caring genuinely about one another in a way that is connected to essence rather than ego. Any other thoughts, Zainab? What's on your mind? There you are.
Yeah. It's interesting that Jafar gets the chance to choose. So there's always hope for someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the black magician got his ass kicked, but Jafar was treated much more kindly because, maybe there was still hope for redemption for him. For the black magician, there was no hope of redemption.
Yeah, it's like he had already made his choice on his path. But there's much more. I mean, I would sleep on it. It's nice to have
Absolutely.
stories. Yeah, it's nice to have stories like this. You can see that there's so many layers that you could touch upon, but it's not there at the same time.
Yeah, it's certainly tough to get to all of that within, an hour and a half or even 2 hours or more. So certainly I appreciate you saying that this is something that you're feeling called to sleep on and think about because that's the hope. Yeah.
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 I would urge all of you to download the PDF of the story and reread it at some point because we glossed over a whole bunch.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's
otherwise we'd be here for 2.5 hours instead of 1.5.
right. Yeah.
Do you think there's also like a manual to the fourth way, like as in telling you step by step, or it's more like a
Ouspensky tried to create a manual and didn't exactly succeed. So there's no book. There is no secret Wudong manuscript that you can read and become a master from reading. It's a lived experience.
Yeah. And Gurdjieff understood that. That's why he was kind of a pain in the ass about being direct in his his framework and his ideas and such. He didn't want it to be the mail order booklet that you get out of the back of the magazine. Because it takes more focus and commitment than that to really to make meaning out of this content, I guess we could say, and to make good use of it. Not something you're going to achieve in a weekend when you're binge reading this story or any other. Thanks, Zainab. Any other thoughts? Are you good? Well, thank you very much. Yeah. Nancy, anything else coming to mind?
Not at this point. Although one thing that's interesting is that my take on the way that Gafar wants Zainab is that he doesn't just want somebody beautiful to show off to friends. You know, he's looking for some better qualities than that, even if he's not doesn't understand what a real relationship is.
I do think there is something to that. I think that he wanted something deeper, was at the point where the superficial stuff wasn't necessarily going to satisfy him anymore.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and one possibly weird reading is if we look at this as something that's happening inside one person. You've got a person who wants to be enlightened, and you've got a part of them that understands what enlightenment is. And since the person who wants enlightenment is going about it all wrong, the part that's actually capable of enlightenment is flinching away. I'm not sure if that's a fair reading.
I think it's an interesting thought in any case.
Yeah.
I think that as far as Gafar is concerned, it's pretty much like whatever good thing is being born, it's very much in its early stages, and he does not know how to make sense of it.
No, and the implication, of course, is that he is going to become a student of the white magician and learn all of these good things, but we don't know that that will actually happen because, frankly, he's a bit of a dick.
Yeah, he's got a lot of growing up to do, a lot of maturing to do, a lot of shit about himself to sort through. And that's going to be a long road. So, thank you for those observations, Nancy. Jonathan, what's coming up for you?
You guys came up with all the answers. I've got nothing to add.
Well, dang.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you have others, so if anything comes up, definitely feel
Yeah.
welcome to share.
So, Cherie, where is Cherie? Cherie, what do you think?
That was a big story. And
It was a big story, yeah.
I've got a lot of, as Jonathan said, everybody's answered a lot of things, but things that came up for me were you can't force anything that you desire. Things unfold as the way they're meant to unfold, and you can't have a magic trick to make something happen. You can't force people to do things. People have to make choices. You have choices. That was the other thing I like Zainab saying, you know, the difference between your ego and your essence making a choice is a very powerful thing that when you're doing the work, you think, where's that coming from? My question is, why is it that, and I get this a lot from women, is that when you are trying to do something nice for someone or help them in some way, they always feel guilty about accepting it. If there's a right and proper action to take, they find it really hard to accept it. And as we're living our life, you know, if we ask for help and we accept it and set that example, more and more we can follow that. How we're doing things, you know, there's no gift without a receiver. And asking for help is okay. So it's like, yeah. They're the difficulties that the story popped into my head. Why do we do that? Is that my ego saying, no, it's okay, it's okay? No, it's not okay. I need some help.
Yeah,
I can't
definitely.
keep this one out by myself. I can't fight this one by myself.
And that's definitely something to consider. Like, was Zainab in a position where she was? Is it because she was tempted to not get help, or was she afraid to ask for help? You know, and then she has her companion going and making sure that she's looking out for Zainab, even as Zainab is like, I gotta handle this. I don't interfere, please, and being really stressed out about it. So who knows? But that's certainly an interesting potential layer to this narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, very enjoyable. Really enjoyed today's book. Thank you.
Thank you, Shuri. C, are you there? Do you have anything you might like to offer? You might be just listening in today, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to share. And Aaron as well. He mentioned in the chat, I didn't have the chance to touch on it, but he said, speaking of 3 and 7, it reminds me of Pythagoras and his aversion to irrational numbers.
Yep.
Yes. So I didn't want to let that go unmentioned. Aaron also says, I find it interesting that when Gafar wanted something, he would offer his possessions, and it makes me wonder what he thought of his own value. I think that's a really intriguing point too. I mean,
Indeed.
if you think that the only way to get what you want, or that's been the lesson that you've been taught over time, that you can only buy what you want. I mean, I think that's something to meditate on within the context of this story, certainly. And I guess that was something that kind of came up for me was, what is it in Gafar that is making him stop to pause and think about these possibilities of getting what he wants through means of force? What is it about that that's making him stop and think, I don't know if I want to do that? And he was also relieved that Zainab was not responsive to his trying to buy her. What's that about? And we can make guesses, but I think humans are complex, and I think Gurdjieff, even in the midst of all these tropes, was trying to hint at that complexity. So thanks, Aaron. Very good. So, we've been going on a while. And I
Yeah,
don't want to
it's
keep everyone here all evening or morning or afternoon.
yeah, and we're getting hungry, so
Yeah.
especially staring at all the good food in the marketplace behind me.
Oh man.
Yeah,
So
I know
if
there's baklava right around the corner.
yeah, so just to finish up Aaron's thought, Aaron says, maybe if she had accepted, she being Zainab, maybe if she had accepted easily, she would have been like anyone from his harem and not what he was really after. I do think that's very much part of it.
Yeah, but to accept would mean that she would have to completely devalue herself.
Yeah.
She would have to make herself an object
Mm-hmm.
and basically
And
become his slave.
he is finding himself less and less attracted to that. Yep. All right. Yes. Yum baklava. Yes, absolutely. I could go for some of that right now. All right. Well, if anyone has anything else they want to add, you can always chat with us in the comments on this YouTube video or in the Facebook group. And where are we going to post the PDF to this? Are we going to have it in the description?
It's
or-
going to be in the description, yeah.
Good. All right. So that'll be easy to access just right here on YouTube. And we hope to hear more about what you think and what came up for you while engaging with this story and with this conversation. And other than that, anything else to add, Mushtaq?
Nope.
All right,
we
then.
can
So,
wave and say goodbye.
yeah, we'll go on
and
Brady
head on
Bunch
our way.
mode.
Yeah.
Wave to each other and wave to everyone here with us and watching on the replay. And
We'll see you on the
will see
rebound.
you next week. All right.
Yes.
Bye.